The Crimson Nebula Tavern flickered like a tired heartbeat at the edge of Port Asteria, its neon sign stuttering between life and darkness, as if reluctant to admit defeat. Inside, the air was a haze of burnt oil, alien spice, and the metallic scent of ozone that clung to the city's underbelly. Ellen Morgan wove through the narrow aisles with a tray balanced expertly on one hand, his other steadying a pitcher that hissed faintly from the heat of its contents. He moved with the grace of repetition, a rhythm born of necessity rather than ease. At 16, the boy had the lean build of someone who skipped more meals than he should, yet his eyes clear, camber brown, and stubbornly alive held a light the rest of the tavern had long since surrendered. 2 Asterian brews, 1 extra spiced, he said, setting the glasses before a trio of scarred reptilian traders. They grunted their thanks, or maybe it was dismissal hard to tell with their kind, but Ellen smiled anyway. He always smiled, because it cost nothing and made the world feel a little less sharp. Corbin, the tavern's owner, barked something from behind the counter, his voice like grinding gravel in a rusted pipe, and Ellen responded with an obedient "Yes, sir," before scrubbing down another table. Every motion was mechanical, practiced, yet under it all lingered the quiet thought of home, the cramped apartment where his grandmother, Meredith, waited with her wheezing breath and fragile smile. Her medicine was running out again. Prices had tripled since the last shipment arrived, and no amount of overtime could stretch his credits far enough. Still, he pushed the worry aside. One more shift. One more night of keeping his head down. He told himself that was enough. When the clock finally clicked past midnight, the tavern's chaos thinned to murmurs and clattering glasses. Ellen hung his apron on a hook, his fingers stiff with fatigue, and gathered a small package of leftovers Corbin grudgingly allowed staff to take. Steam curled from the Bagandorian noodles, still warm, rich with spice. It would be a rare treat for his grandmother. He stepped out into the chill of Port Asteria's artificial night, where the hum of distant hovercraft mixed with the low, electric sigh of broken street lamps. One of them sputtered overhead, flashing pale crimson across cracked pavement. That was when he saw the figure. An alien humanoid, but unmistakably other-sat, slumped against the wall near the dumpster, his blue skin dulled beneath layers of grime. The man's suit, once sand-colored and fine, hung loose and threadbare, a ghost of wealth long abandoned. Ellen slowed, instinct urging him to walk on. He couldn't afford to share the food. Not tonight, not when Gran needed it. But the old alien's posture stopped him. There was something dignified even in his ruin, a quiet endurance that mirrored the ache in Ellen's own chest. He hesitated, then sighed, the choice already made. "Excuse me, sir," he said softly, approaching with careful steps. The alien stirred, amber eyes flicking up through the shadow of his hood clear, intelligent, weary. "Are you hungry?" Ellen asked. The old man blinked as if the question itself were foreign. "I am," he admitted, voice low and musical, but cracked at the edges. Ellen knelt and opened the package, the fragrant steam rising between them. "It's Andorian noodles," he said, offering the food. "Not fancy, but it's good." The alien stared at him for a moment that stretched too long, searching his face for mockery or motive, and found none. "You would give this to me?" he asked. "Sure," Ellen said with a small shrug. "My mom used to say kindness costs nothing. Might as well prove her right." The alien's hands trembled as he accepted the meal, his expression unreadable. For a while, they sat together in silence, broken only by the soft sounds of the city and the faint clatter of chopsticks against the container. Ellen talked a little nothing important, just chatter about work, about the broken heater in his apartment, about the way Port Asteria smelled different after rain. The old alien listened, occasionally smiling, though his gaze seemed to measure more than words. When Ellen finally stood, brushing dust from his worn uniform, he offered a parting nod. "Take care of yourself, all right? Nights get cold here." The alien's voice stopped him as he turned to go. "You have given without expectation, human. Remember this moment." Ellen blinked, unsure what to say. But before he could respond, the alien added, "You may call me Thorn." Under the flickering red light, his amber eyes caught the glow and burned with quiet intensity, too sharp, too deliberate for any beggar. Ellen smiled faintly, unaware that he'd just stepped into a story that would change the galaxy. He only knew he'd done the right thing. Then he walked into the neon dark, never noticing that the homeless man was already reaching for a hidden communicator. His voice calm and measured as he said, "Jarvis, begin background checks on a human boy named Ellen Morgan. I believe we found one." The next morning broke in a haze of dull light filtered through the cracked blinds of a one-room apartment that smelled faintly of rust and stale tea. Ellen stirred awake to the soft, rhythmic sound of his grandmother's coughing from the next room. The heater had given up again during the night, leaving the air brittle and cold enough that his breath misted faintly as he exhaled. He pushed off the threadbare blanket and sat up on his thin mattress, blinking sleep from his eyes, then ran a hand through his unkempt brown hair. For a moment he simply sat there, staring at the wall patched with insulation tape, listening to the hum of distant transport lanes and the life of a city that barely noticed his existence. His grandmother, Meredith Morgan, was already awake when he entered her room, propped up on pillows, her frail body wrapped in a warm shawl. The faint rasp of her breathing filled the quiet. "Morning, Gran," he said softly, forcing a brightness into his voice. "Tea's on." She smiled at him, lines deepening around eyes still kind, despite the years and the illness. "You were late again," she murmured. "Corbin keeping you after hours?" Ellen shrugged, bringing her a steaming mug and a thin slice of bread spread with synth jam. "Just busy night. No fights this time." She chuckled, though it triggered another cough. "You make it sound like progress." He waited until her coughing eased, then placed a small container on her lap, half the noodles from last night, the other half already gone. "Brought you something better than paste," he said. "Andorian noodles. Real spice." She blinked in surprise, eyes glistening. "You didn't eat?" "I had some," he lied. "They'd just throw it away otherwise." She gave him that look, the one that saw through every falsehood, but chose not to challenge it. Instead, she touched his cheek with a trembling hand. "Your kindness will come back to you, Ellen. It always does." He smiled at that, though privately he doubted the universe worked that way. Maybe kindness just made the struggle feel less hollow. Maybe that was enough. He was clearing dishes when a sharp chime interrupted the quiet. The door screen flashed "Delivery pending." Asteria Medical Supply in crisp blue text. Ellen frowned, exchanging a look with his grandmother. They couldn't afford any deliveries. He pressed his thumb to the scanner anyway, and with a mechanical whir, the door slid open to reveal a hovering courier drone polished to corporate gleam, its voice smooth and professional. "Recipient, Ellen Morgan. Please verify identity." He did, and the drone presented a sleek white case embossed with the insignia of Asteria Medical, the premium supplier, whose catalogs he'd stared at 100 times, knowing he could never afford even their cheapest product. "Delivery complete." "Have a pleasant day," the drone chirped, zipping off into the chill air before he could ask questions. Ellen stared down at the case, as if afraid it might vanish. "Gran," he whispered, carrying it inside. When he opened it, the breath left him. Inside were neatly stacked packets of respiratory medication, the good kind, the kind doctors said could restore lung function instead of merely slowing its decay. A full year's supply. Tucked on top was a folded note on thick paper, embossed with the symbol of the Galactic Youth Diplomatic Academy. No sender's name, just a single line written in elegant script, for services to the community. Meredith's hand went to her mouth, her eyes wet. Ellen, how? He could only shake his head, stunned. We can't, this must be some mistake. Miracles are just kindnesses we can't explain, she whispered, her voice breaking. Maybe someone finally saw what kind of boy you are. Ellen swallowed hard, blinking against the sudden sting in his eyes. The words felt heavy in his chest. He wanted to believe it, wanted to believe goodness had weight in this city of gears and credits. But his mind churned with questions. Who would know about them? Who would care? He thought of the old alien outside the tavern, the steady amber eyes, the measured tone of his voice. You may call me Thorn. It echoed in his head like a pulse. That same day, when he returned from the market, another package awaited him, this time a thick envelope sealed with shimmering blue wax. He tore it open with trembling hands. The letter inside bore the sigil of the Galactic Youth Diplomatic Academy, its wording formal but impossible to misinterpret. Full scholarship awarded. Boarding and family accommodation provided. Immediate placement pending acceptance. His name printed at the bottom in graceful lettering. Ellen Morgan. His pulse hammered. The Academy was a legend training future ambassadors and council envoys from the richest systems in the quadrant. Humans almost never got in, not even the privileged ones born on Earth's inner colonies. He read the words again, disbelieving. Gran, they're offering to take us both, he said faintly. Meredith stared at him as though afraid to breathe. You have to go, she whispered. This could change everything. Ellen sat heavily, the letter shaking in his hand. It's insane. They don't even know me. Maybe they do, she said softly, watching him with a knowing smile. You gave what little you had to someone who needed it more. Maybe the universe was listening. He tried to smile but failed. Somewhere deep inside, wonder tangled with unease. He looked out the narrow window toward the hazy skyline, where the suns of Asteria burned through smog and promise alike. For the first time in his life, the horizon didn't look impossible. It looked like an invitation. And far above, unseen among the traffic lanes of the elite, a sleek silver vessel glided silently toward orbit. Inside, Thorndex leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on a holographic display showing a young human's name. Scholarship approved, he murmured to his AI assistant. Prepare housing for two. Ensure anonymity. A pause, then a faint smile. He gave his meal without hesitation, Jarvis. Now we'll see what else the boy is willing to give. The shuttle descended through the layered haze of Port Asterias. Central District, its hull shimmering with the glow of re-entry as Ellen pressed his face to the window. The view was dizzying. Glass towers rose like shards of ice, their mirrored surfaces catching sunlight from the system's 3 small suns. Streams of hover traffic moved in elegant precision between them, each vehicle following a path projected by unseen algorithms. He had never been this high above the lower sectors before. From up here, the alleys where he'd lived looked like veins of shadow cut into a metallic body. Across from him, his grandmother sat upright, despite the subtle vibration of the shuttles. Descent, her thin hands clasped together as she gazed out with quiet wonder. I never thought I'd see the spires, she whispered. Ellen smiled faintly, his stomach twisting in equal parts awe and anxiety. Me neither. Guess we're not just ghosts anymore. When they landed at the Academy's platform, he was unprepared for its scale. The Galactic Youth Diplomatic Academy stretched across several levels like a living city gardens, blooming under transparent domes, pathways spiraling upward toward lecture towers of prismatic glass. Uniformed students of every imaginable species moved through the plaza, their voices blending into a low multilingual hum. Ellen caught glimpses of creatures with silver scales, translucent skin, wings folded like silk, each radiating a confidence he lacked. He felt small in his plain gray clothes, his old boots dulled from years of kitchen work. Yet beneath the intimidation was a flicker of something else possibility. "Welcome to the Academy," a voice said behind him. He turned to find a sleek service drone hovering at eye level. "Orientation begins at the Grand Atrium. Housing assignments will be transmitted upon registration. Family members will be escorted to medical accommodations." Meredith touched his arm gently. "I'll be fine, dear. You focus on making the most of this." Her tone carried the strength he'd relied on all his life, and for a moment he could only nod, swallowing emotion. Watching her leave with. The med escort made the new world feel larger and lonelier all at once. The atrium was a marvel, an enormous circular hall lit by suspended orbs that floated like suns. Holographic banners rippled overhead, displaying the Academy's motto, "Through understanding, peace." Ellen registered at the human-sized terminal, receiving a slim wristband that pulsed once to confirm identity. His name glowed faintly above his dorm assignment. Around him, groups of students clustered in comfortable familiarity, already speaking in half a dozen alien tongues. He hovered at the edges, uncertain, until a melodic voice drew his attention. "You're human," it said, not a question, more a fascinated observation. He turned to see her standing a few feet away. She was luminous skin, the soft lavender of dusk, silver hair braided down one shoulder, and eyes the color of polished emeralds that seemed to catch every shade of light. Her simple white academy uniform somehow looked regal on her slender frame. "Last I checked," Ellen said, managing a nervous grin, "I'm Ellen Morgan." "Aaliyah Nix," she replied, extending a delicate six-fingered hand. Her touch was warm. "I've read about humans, but I never expected to meet one here. You're rarer than starlight in these halls." "Guess that makes me a curiosity," he said. She tilted her head, studying him. "No, it makes you brave." The words lingered as they joined the line, moving toward the orientation hall. The Chancellor, a tall avian being draped in ceremonial robes, addressed them from a dais, surrounded by holographic displays of galaxies and treaties. He spoke of unity, diplomacy, and the Academy's legacy of nurturing peacekeepers who shaped civilizations. Ellen listened, half in awe, half in disbelief that he belonged anywhere near this vision. But when the speech ended, the murmur around him shifted, whispers, glances, laughter too faint to hide. A cluster of blue-skinned students stood near. The back, their silver uniforms gleaming with familial crests. One of them, a tall young man with sharp features and white hair, styled with precision, regarded Ellen with open disdain. "They're accepting strays now?" The boy muttered, loud enough to carry. "What's next? A mining drone as student council president?" A few around him chuckled. Ellen's face heated, but before he could speak, Alaya stepped forward. "Careful, Darden. Your arrogance is showing." The blue-skinned youth's gaze shifted toward her, expression tightening. "You overstep, Nix. This isn't one of your council debates." "No," she said coolly. "It's an orientation. Maybe try acting like you belong here." The tension was thick enough to hum. Darton's eyes flicked to Ellen once more, cold and assessing, before he turned away with a flick of his wrist. "Enjoy your pet project, Aaliyah. I'm sure it'll end predictably." When he and his entourage departed, Alaya sighed. "That was Darton Dex," she explained quietly. "His family funds a third of this academy. Best to ignore him." Ellen frowned. "Dex? Like Dex Interstellar?" "Yes," she said, watching his reaction. "Why?" He hesitated, memory flashing the old alien's measured voice, his amber eyes, the name he'd given. Thorn Dex. The coincidence felt too sharp to ignore, but he kept it to himself. No reason, he said, forcing a smile. Just sounds familiar. As the day wore on, they toured the campus together, wandering through crystalline corridors filled with the hum of alien languages and the scent of strange flora. Aliyah laughed easily, her curiosity boundless, asking about human customs and earth myths. For the first time in years, Ellen found himself talking freely, the heaviness of survival replaced by something lighter wonder. When evening came, they stood by the observation window, overlooking the city's tri-sunset, the sky a gradient of gold, rose, and violet. Aliyah glanced at him, her expression soft. "You don't act like most humans described in our texts," she said. "They call your species reckless, emotional." "We are," he admitted. "But we care hard too. Maybe that's our flaw and our strength." She smiled, eyes reflecting the dying light. Perhaps that's what the galaxy needs more of. The lights dimmed around them as the sun sank below the skyline. Far above, unseen, a private transmission pulsed from a high-orbit satellite. Subject: Ellen Morgan. Observation phase complete. Initiate next stage. And somewhere beyond the clouds, Thorndex watched the feed in silence, his hands clasped behind his back as he murmured, "Let's see if compassion can survive power." Morning light spilled through the crystalline arches of the Academy's east wing, scattering colors like shards of dawn across polished floors. Ellen moved through the hallways with a practiced calm, though every step still carried a trace of disbelief that he belonged there. A week had passed since orientation, yet each day unfolded like awaking dream lectures in interspecies diplomacy, training simulations that tested empathy as much as strategy, and long conversations with Aliyah that blurred the line between curiosity and quiet affection. He'd begun to settle into rhythm, even finding moments of laughter between the challenges, until the message arrived. Student Ellen Morgan report to the Chancellor's office immediately. The words glowed across his wristband in cold, official text. He reread it 3 times, pulse quickening. Summons from the Chancellor were rare and never good. When he arrived at the top of the spire, 2 guards stood by the ornate doors, their armor glinting like burnished glass. One nodded and gestured him inside. The office was vast, circular, lined with towering windows that revealed the sprawling city below. And at its center, standing with hands clasped behind his back, was the old man from the alley, but gone were the rags and grime. The figure before him wore a perfectly tailored coat of midnight fabric, threaded with faint light. His blue skin gleamed smooth and unblemished, his white hair pulled neatly back, his bearing regal yet calm. Amber eyes regarded Ellen with warmth and the faintest flicker of amusement. "You've grown into this place quickly," he said, his voice resonant, carrying the same musical cadence Ellen remembered. For a moment, Ellen couldn't find words. The name escaped him in a whisper. "Thorn?" The man inclined his head. "Thorndex, in full. Founder of Dex Interstellar. You might say I have multiple vocations." Ellen's mind reeled. The alley, the food, the humility, it all shattered against the reality standing before him. You were pretending?" Thorn gestured toward a chair. "Sit, there's much to explain." Ellen remained standing, the shock sharpening his voice. "You tricked me." "I tested you," Thorn corrected softly. "A small difference, but an important one." "Why?" Ellen demanded. "Because I needed to see something money can't measure." Thorn's tone held no arrogance, only a weary honesty. "Your species fascinates me, Ellen. Humans live in scarcity, yet share what little they have. You gave away your meal without hesitation, not out of charity, but instinct. That quality is rare among advanced civilizations." He moved toward the window, the city's light reflecting off his silhouette like a living constellation. Compassion without agenda. Kindness without calculation. It's what I fear my own people have forgotten. Ellen's anger ebbed beneath confusion. So all this the medicine, the scholarship was you? Yes, Thorne said simply. A repayment and an opportunity. I'm funding a study on latent human potential. I believe empathy is more than emotion. It's an evolutionary force. One that could change the balance of the galaxy. You're talking about abilities? Ellen asked cautiously. Thorne smiled, not denying it. You've felt it, haven't you? The way the world seems to shift when you care too deeply. Humans adapt through emotion. That is your gift. Ellen's mind flickered to the strange moments lately, the doors that seemed to open before he touched them, the sense of connection he felt with Alaya during their simulations, as though their thoughts had brushed. I don't understand. You will, Thorne promised. You're not the first to show signs. There are others. But you, Ellen, have something different, a balance of compassion and restraint. I intend to nurture it. Ellen hesitated, suspicion creeping in. Why me? Thorne turned back to him, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. Because you remind me of what I used to be before I drowned in my own wealth. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the low hum of the city below. This academy, Thorne continued, was built not just to train diplomats, but to test ideas, how empathy can influence power. My nephew Darton sees it as a playground for elites. I see it as a forge for evolution. The mention of Darton made Ellen's stomach tighten. He doesn't seem fond of me. No, Thorne admitted. He represents the old order. Efficiency without heart, control without conscience. He believes compassion is weakness. He'll oppose what I'm building, which means he'll oppose you. Then why tell me all this? Because hiding from truth won't protect you. Knowledge will. Thorne stepped closer, his gaze steady and kind. Remember the night you shared your meal? That moment set events in motion far beyond either of us. I intend to see where it leads. Ellen looked away, overwhelmed. Part of him wanted to storm out, to reject the manipulation, yet beneath it all was gratitude, raw and uncomfortable. The man had given him everything he'd only dreamed of, and yet it wasn't charity. It was something else, an invitation. What do you want from me? Ellen asked quietly. Nothing you haven't already given, Thorne said. Be yourself. Care as fiercely as you did that night. The galaxy will test you for it, but if you endure, you'll change it. He paused, then added, and when that happens, remember power isn't the opposite of compassion. It's its consequence. As Ellen left the office, the light from the tri-suns caught his reflection in the glass doors, layering his image over Thorne's distant silhouette. Two figures, one young and uncertain, one old and burdened, divided by a generation, and joined by a single act of kindness neither could undo. Outside, Aliyah waited for him on the steps, her silver hair glinting in the wind. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said gently. Not a ghost, he murmured, glancing up at the gleaming deck's interstellar logo etched into the Academy's spire. A king who once begged for bread. And somewhere deep in the administrative network, a hidden data file flickered open, its header marked Project, Human Potential, Phase 2 authorized. The Academy's night sky shimmered with the light of 3 suns sinking beneath the horizon, their colors melting into violet haze that painted the upper glass towers in melancholy brilliance. Ellen stood on the balcony of his dorm, staring. At the distant skyline, the events of that afternoon replaying like a fever dream. The revelation of Thorndex's true identity had upended everything he thought he understood. The man he'd fed out of pity now commanded fleets, fortunes, and institutions that shaped entire worlds. The act had been simple, one meal, one gesture, but its echo had reached farther than reason could measure. Beneath the swirl of awe and gratitude pulsed something heavier unease. If Thorne had orchestrated all this, what else was moving beneath the surface? The thought gnawed at him as the wind pressed cool against his skin. "You've been quiet." "All evening," said Alia from the doorway, her lavender skin luminous in the fading light. She stepped beside him, the faint floral scent of her skin a comfort. "Thinking," he said, "about Thorndex." Her eyes softened. "You met him. He's not what I expected," Ellen admitted. "He said he's studying human potential, something about empathy being an evolutionary force." "That sounds like him," she murmured. "My father worked for Dex Interstellar once. They say Thorn was brilliant visionary, but also reckless. He believed emotion could shape reality." Ellen glanced at her, startled. "You mean literally?" "Perhaps," she said, her tone thoughtful. "Dexian legends speak of the resonant path, the idea that intention and emotion can alter physical fields. It's dismissed as myth now, but Thorn always chased it." Ellen leaned against the railing. "Then maybe he found proof." "Maybe," Alia said, "but proof can be dangerous." The wind shifted, carrying the distant hum of anti-grav engines and the faint vibration of approaching aircraft. Ellen turned, brow furrowing. "That's too heavy for Academy patrols." Alia's wristband flashed red. "Security alert. Restricted section breach. Level Alpha." She met his gaze, alarm looming in her eyes. "That's the research wing," she whispered. They broke into a run, racing through empty corridors illuminated by pulsing emergency lights. The Academy felt transformed sterile beauty, replaced by tension humming through every wall. At the entrance to the restricted sector, 2 guards lay unconscious, their weapons scattered. The door beyond flickered open and shut, sparks spitting from a damaged lock. Ellen and Alia slipped inside, following the echo of raised voices. "You've gone too far, Uncle." The words rang sharp through the corridor. Ellen's stomach tightened. He recognized the voice instantly. Darton Dex stood in the center of the main laboratory, his blue skin flushed with anger. His immaculate uniform was rumpled, his composure cracking. Across from him, Thorn stood calm and unyielding, his expression that of a man who had already anticipated every move. "Too far?" Thorn's voice was low, almost gentle. "I've gone exactly as far as evolution demands." "By experimenting on primitives?" Darton spat. "By awakening power in species too volatile to control?" "By trusting compassion where you trust fear," Thorn corrected. The younger Gex laughed bitterly. "Compassion doesn't win wars. It creates weakness." Ellen edged closer with Alia, staying behind a column of holographic equipment. "He's going to expose him," Alia whispered, "to the Council. He's been trying to find proof for weeks." "If he does," Ellen said, "Thorn's project, and everyone like me, is finished." "Then we stop him," she said, her jaw set. Before Ellen could respond, Darton's voice rose again. "You think your human pets will save you? They'll destroy everything you've built." Thorn's gaze softened with something almost like pity. "Perhaps destruction is the price of rebirth." Darton pulled a compact device from his belt and slammed it into a console. Sirens blared instantly. Lights dimmed, then turned blood red. "You just sealed your own fate," Darton snarled. "I've transmitted your files to the Galactic Council. Every experiment, every illegal activation sequence, everything." "Including your sabotage?" Thorn asked quietly. Darton froze for half a heartbeat before sneering. "They'll believe me over you." "You've lost your mind, old man." Ellen felt the crackle of energy, a moment before the explosion, surge of white light that flared through the lab as containment barriers failed. The blast wave hurled debris across the chamber. Alia shielded her eyes, her skin glowing faintly as she projected a translucent barrier of energy. When the light dimmed, Ellen saw Thorn kneeling amid the wreckage, one arm shielding his face, the other clutching a fractured data core. Smoke and sparks filled the air. "Security's coming," Alia said urgently. "We need to get him out." Ellen ran forward, ignoring her call. He grabbed Thorn's arm, pulling him to his feet. "We have to move." "No," Thorn rasped. "The data the reactor. He's locked the safety protocols." Darton was gone, vanished through a maintenance door. "He's heading for the city grid," Thorn said, coughing. "He'll trigger a cascade through the energy network. Millions could die." Ellen's pulse thundered. "Then we stop him." "You can't," Thorn said. "You're not ready." "I don't care." His voice was steady, certain. "You told me compassion was power. Then let me use it." Thorn's amber eyes met his. Something unspoken passed between them, recognition, pride, perhaps the ache of inevitability. "Very well," Thorn said. "But know this, Ellen Morgan, you act now as more than a boy. You act as the spark of a new age." The old man pressed a small crystal into Ellen's hand, a Dexian command key pulsing faint blue. "Find Darton. Stop the override. Save them." They ran. Through collapsing corridors, through clouds of smoke and falling glass, until they reached the transit platform where the city's heartbeat thrummed in mechanical rhythm. Overhead, drones streaked toward the power facility, already flashing with containment alarms. "He's there," Aliyah said. "In the core tower. Then that's where we end this." Ellen gripped the crystal, feeling its pulse sync with his own heartbeat. For the first time, the energy inside him didn't feel like fear. It felt alive, ready. Somewhere far below, Port Asteria's lights flickered as power began to fail. Above them, Thorn watched their figures disappear into the storm-lit horizon, a whisper escaping his lips, half prayer, half prophecy. "Kindness will burn brighter than empire." Port Asteria burned with light as emergency sirens wailed across the city's steel canyons. From the Academy's upper terrace, the skyline looked like a dying constellation, reactor towers pulsing crimson, containment barriers flickering, skycraft veering away in panicked swarms. Ellen gripped the command crystal tighter, its cold surface alive beneath his fingers, resonating with the frantic rhythm of his heart. Aliyah ran beside him as they boarded the nearest transport skimmer, its engines roaring to life in protest. The craft shot through the maze of skyscrapers toward the central power facility, a monolithic structure of black alloy and glass that glowed like a wounded star. Inside its heart, Darton Dex was preparing to destroy everything. "You realize we have no plan?" Aliyah shouted over the engine hum. "Sure we do," Ellen said breathlessly. "Stop him. Don't die." She almost laughed despite the chaos. "You humans and your simplicity." The skimmer jolted as a shockwave rippled from the city's core, nearly flipping the craft. Below, entire sectors plunged into darkness. "Containment's failing," Aliyah said, scanning the readouts. "If the reactor breaches, half the city will be vaporized." Ellen felt something deep in his chest stir not panic, but clarity, the same strange warmth he'd felt when he'd helped Thorn, when he'd comforted his grandmother, when he'd first met Aliyah. It pulsed outward, wrapping the moment in sharp focus. "Then we end it now." They landed on a shattered balcony of the reactor tower, metal still glowing from heat. The interior blazed with warning lights, smoke curling around fractured conduits. Darton's voice echoed over the internal coms, cold and resonant. "You should have stayed in your place, Ewan. This is what comes of giving power to children." Ellen sprinted through the broken corridor, Aliyah close behind. Sparks rained from the ceiling, every step vibrating with the reactor's unstable pulse. They emerged onto the central platform, a wide circular chamber where the core itself hung suspended in magnetic fields, a sphere of seething blue energy. Darton stood at the control nexus, his uniform torn, his expression feverish. "It's too late," he said as they approached. "The cascade has started. The Council will see the truth when they sift through the ashes, that emotion and empathy are fatal flaws. No, Ellen said, voice steady despite the roar. They'll see what real strength looks like. Strength? Darton laughed, raising a control device. You think compassion is strength? It's weakness disguised as virtue. Maybe, Ellen said, stepping forward, but it's the kind that saves people. Darton pressed the trigger. The containment field cracked. The chamber erupted in blinding light as plasma vents burst, sending waves of heat and force across the platform. Alaya threw up a protective barrier, but it shimmered, fracturing under the strain. Ellen dropped to one knee, the command crystal in his hand flaring bright. Think, Ellen, Alaya gasped. If that core destabilizes, then I'll stabilize it. He focused, closing his eyes. The world narrowed to heartbeat and hum, to the trembling thread of connection he'd felt since meeting Thorn. The crystal responded, merging with the rhythm of his thoughts. He felt the energy field's turbulence violent, desperate, alive, and reached out with something deeper than reason. Not power, but compassion. The same force that had guided every act that brought him here. The energy flared around him, tendrils of light twisting from his hands as he extended them toward the reactor. Impossible, Darton whispered, backing away. You can't? I'm not controlling it, Ellen said through clenched teeth. I'm calming it. For a moment, the blue sphere stilled, its fury dampened, the air vibrating with harmonic resonance. Alia staggered beside him, her skin glowing lavender as she lent him strength. The connection between them solidified, two hearts beating as one current. Now, she shouted. Ellen directed the energy through the command crystal, sending a surge of stabilizing force into the core. The entire facility trembled, light bleeding through every seam. Darton lunged toward them, fury twisting his face. You'll ruin everything, he screamed, reaching for the control node. A wave of telekinetic energy hurled him back, slamming him against the far wall. Ellen barely realized it was his own doing. The reactor's light dimmed, stabilizing. Then silence, pure, stunned silence. Only the hiss of cooling conduits remained. Aliyah let out a shaking breath, collapsing against him. You did it, she whispered. We did it, he corrected softly. Across the chamber, Darton groaned, struggling to rise. His face was pale, his arrogance broken. Ellen moved toward him, ignoring the pain radiating through his body. The older boy stared up, expecting revenge, but Ellen extended his hand. Get up, he said quietly. No one deserves to die here. Darton looked at him as if seeing him for the first time, then took the hand, trembling. Why? He rasped. After everything I did. Because someone has to break the cycle, Ellen said. The words hung there as security forces stormed in council guards, academy medics, Thorn himself limping among them, his expression a blend of pride and exhaustion. It's over, Thorn said, his voice raw. You saved them. Ellen turned to him, too drained to speak. No, Thorn added softly. You saved all of us. The days that followed blurred into light and motion. The council's investigation cleared Thorn and condemned Darton, though at Thorn's request, the sentence became rehabilitation, not exile. News feeds across the galaxy replayed the footage of the human boy who saved Port Asteria. The phrase spread faster than the truth behind it. Ellen hated the title, but accepted it. If it inspired kindness, it was worth the misnomer. Weeks later, he stood once more on his balcony as the suns dipped low. The city had rebuilt itself around hope rather than fear. Thorn's reforms were sweeping opening Dex Interstellar's resources to humanitarian development, funding education and peace programs for cross-species youth. And soon there would be something new, the Human Alien Advancement Initiative. He felt a presence beside him before she spoke. Still thinking too much? Alia teased. Her silver hair caught the fading light, eyes soft with something beyond affection faith. Trying to understand how all this happened, he said. A meal shared in an alley, and now. She smiled. Kindness changes the trajectory of stars. He turned to her, smiling faintly. Maybe it's just stubbornness. Maybe it's love, she said simply, and kissed him. Beneath them, Port Asteria glowed in the twilight, alive and renewed. In the next tower far above, Thorn watched the lights of his city with weary satisfaction. On his desk lay a sealed document, his final directive. It named Ellen Morgan as heir to Dex Interstellar. As he closed his eyes for the last time, he whispered the words that had guided everything: kindness without calculation. The next morning, the galaxy awoke to a new era. Ships bearing the Dex insignia departed from the orbital docks, each painted with a single phrase in shining white letters: "Empathy is power." And among the crowds watching them rise, Ellen and Alia stood hand in hand, two souls from different worlds, united by one simple truth: a single act of compassion can rewrite the fate of an entire galaxy.